Well, welcome everyone. It is good to be together this afternoon for this important topic. I want to especially welcome our live audience. Thank you for joining us live today. This is being recorded for those that were unable to join. And so again, we thank you for being here live. And we also thank you, future folks, for those that are watching this in the future. I'm going to pray just to get us started, and then we'll begin with introductions. Let's go to the Lord. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you and praise you for this day. We thank you for the breath in our lungs. We thank you, Father, for the reality that you are our perfect, loving Father, and that because of Christ Jesus, we are your adopted sons and daughters. And so we thank you for that. Father, we pray that you would guide our time today, that you would prepare us and equip us to be good stewards of the gospel that you have entrusted to us. Father, we love you so much. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, again, welcome. It is good to see you folks here. My name is Kevin Trotter, and I have the joy of serving as a volunteer on the advisory board. I serve as the board chair for the advisory board. I'm also a co-vocational pastor for a small church in northern Indiana. And I'm also former law enforcement, which certainly adds fuel to the fire of my passion around this topic. Just quickly about ECAP. ECAP, which is the long form of that, is the Evangelical Council for Abuse Prevention. It is a national association of Christian ministries dedicated to child and youth protection. And we primarily do that through established child safety standards, which are the basis for an independent and evidence-based validation process, which does result in accreditation. ECAP's accreditation seal then represents trust. Trust in the form of peace of mind for parents, and trust in the form of confidence for leaders. And so it is very, very important, unfortunately necessary in the world we live in today. Real quick, I just want to introduce to you Jeremy Herron. He's serving as our interim executive director. He's going to say just a few words about ECAP, and then I will introduce our panel. Jeremy?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Man, I've been had the joy of being with ECAP since 2019. Before getting introduced to ECAP, I was a teacher and was on my way to becoming a principal when I got called into ministry at Providence Church in Frisco, Texas, and served there in the kids ministry for about a decade before now moving up here to Oregon to be family pastor over a large church. And so through my time with ECAP, I've been around and was there at the very beginnings of it to help create the standards, which form so many of the guidelines and so many of the indicators that we want churches to think about. We sat around and a large group of us helped create these standards. And then over the past 5 years, I guess now 6 years, have had the joy of not only introducing Providence Church to it and putting them through the ringer and making sure that all those standards are actually feasible, which they are. The church benefited, I think, greatly from that. So I've been able to be on the leading edge of walking a church through that process. I've worked with other churches around the country in helping them line up to the standards, as well as serving in the cohort space where I get a group of churches together and we just work through the standards bit by bit. And so while it's a big elephant to eat, we take it one bite at a time. And so really, I've been a proponent of ECAP for the past 6 years, and now I'm thrilled to be able to serve as the interim director. And so we've got a great team of people who are there to support our churches, and I'm super thankful for these kinds of conversations.
Thanks, Jeremy. And we really do appreciate that you have stepped up to serve in that interim executive director role. It's incredibly important. So thank you so much for that. All right, I'm going to introduce our panel for today. And just as a side note, certainly feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time. Should something pop up, throw it in there, and I will look at those and add those into our conversation. First on our panel, we have Weyland Glenn. Weyland Glenn is an elder and the executive pastor at Providence Church in Frisco, Texas. He and his family have been members of Providence since 2008. Weyland is a strategic leader who encourages collaboration and open dialogue with the aim of creating and sustaining high-performing teams. His primary responsibilities include ministry oversight, staff development, and vision execution. He truly shepherds those he leads. He is a master at communicating belief in people and commissioning them to effectively use their gifts in order to advance the mission. Prior to joining Providence Church, Weyland spent 7 years working in the corporate world in areas of finance and human resources. Immediately after college, Weyland served as the regional director for K-Life Ministries from 2001 to 2008. Weyland earned a BA in finance from Texas A&M and an MA in leadership from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Weyland has been married to his high school sweetheart for 23 years, and they have 4 wonderful children, aged 9 to 18. And they are a busy family that loves sports, eating out, and playing cards. So certainly we are thankful to have Weyland. And then we have Matt with us. Matt Espenshade is the executive pastor at the Journey Church in Lebanon, Tennessee. Before entering full-time ministry, he enjoyed a 24-year career as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigations. In his last assignment, Mr. Espenshade led the FBI's national office, directing all operations throughout Middle Tennessee. During his career in the FBI, Matt served in various domestic and international leadership positions, including legal attaché in Budapest, Hungary, and Nairobi, Kenya. Matt served as a military intelligence officer in the U.S. Army. He has a BS from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and an MS in organizational leadership from Norwich University in Northfield, Vermont. He's married to his wife, Lisa, and together they have 4 children. Matt serves on the board of directors for Blue Sky Global Ministries, Imago Classical Academy, and the Evangelical Council for Abuse Protection, as well as an adjunct professor of criminal justice at Cumberland University. Welcome to Matt as well. All right, I'm going to turn this on over. Oh, by the way, you can see that I had more hair in this photo. So if you're seeing me now and seeing that, yes, that's an old photo. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Weyland to kick off our panel discussion.
All right, buddy. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate the interest in this important topic. And I'll kind of go over my information, then hand it over to Weyland to get us started into some of the standards and accreditation process. But I just wanted to bring some perspective to this from both the XP seat that I sit in now, just like you all do, and having investigated from a law enforcement perspective for over 24 years, crimes against children, and just kind of how these two things blend and why we can't see ourselves in either one of the 2 ditches. And I say those 2 ditches being just a risk manager or just someone that safeguards the well-being of minors. These things go together, and if you lean too much in either direction, we don't give this the full attention that it deserves. So I'll start this with just a little bit of story. You heard my background. I was in the military, joined the FBI. My first 6 years in the FBI or so, I was working gangs and drugs in New York, making arrests every week, seeing what I thought was just the worst of the worst. I, through circumstances, ended up being in Africa when our embassies were blown up in Kenya and Tanzania, and then worked terrorism. I worked Al-Qaeda pre 9/11 in 17 different countries, interviewing what, again, the worst of the worst. And my wife and I wanted to start a family and didn't want to do it certainly in New York City. It was the last place in the FBI we wanted to be, but we spent our time up there. We moved down to Texas, and the way that it worked in the FBI and still does, the smaller of the office that you're in, the broader scope that you have in investigations. The bigger office that you're in, you have more of a rifled aperture in what you're investigating. So when I moved to Texas, I had my first exposure to crimes against children, the Crimes Against Children program. And it's pretty vast in the information that we're collecting from all over the world, really. And I can remember I got this first lead of a victim that had been identified electronically through the sharing of photos, a young victim, elementary school aged girl. And so did some investigation, put together a search warrant, went out and hit this house and realized that the house was a mother who had just recently been divorced, but this activity started while she was still married. She had a boyfriend now living in the house, and not to get into all the details, but we had collected a lot of both electronic information, and it's still back in the day when there was hard videotape. And one of the problems with doing crimes against children is you have to review all of this evidence. And in going through it for the first time, now remember, I worked gangs and drugs and terrorism, and reviewing all of this evidence, I saw how these pictures had been generated. And I'm watching this video of the mother's boyfriend who is positioning the girl on a bed, and it's one of those old-time beds that has a mirror on the back. And as he leaves the camera and is positioning, doing what he's doing with the girl, I see the mother step in and take over the camera. And the reason that I tell you that story is because at that moment, I realized that you have to get your mind past this blockage that we have as humans and believers, that we expect some modicum of morality out of people. And that blew it for me, in knowing that a mother could be doing that to the child for the mere reason to please the boyfriend. And it changed my mindset, and I really did understand then the depravity in which we're dealing with people. Even despite all of those other experiences, it changed my mindset from then on. And so I think now bringing that perspective and supervising part of the Crimes Against Children program in the FBI for a period of 15 years in the offices that I was in, is that we have two responsibilities. One is, yes, safeguarding the well-being of minors and also upholding the integrity and trustworthiness of the institutions that we serve. Both of those things have to come into perspective for us, and they have to come into perspective with great clarity, because giving the benefit of the doubt in situations like this only leads to ruin for both the victim and the organization. And we have to be able, as XPs, to be courageous as we're looking at these things and address them appropriately. So I hope that caught your attention, and that's going to be the mindset by which I approach a lot of the rest of what I have to say to you today. I think it's important for us to have a relationship with law enforcement agencies as we're doing our risk assessment and risk management, because when or if something would happen, the first time that you have a conversation with authorities is not the time to be having that conversation for the first time in the middle of a crisis. But to give you some perspective on the scope of this problem, to put this in real perspective for us, there's two killers that I saw in law enforcement that we should carry over as XPs as to how not to hinder our duties or hinder investigations from the start. And that is, one, I want to bring some perspective as to underreporting and delayed reporting in these types of cases. As far as organizations go, not what's going on in the home with crimes against children, abuse cases, but as far as institutions go, religious organizations as a whole only trail schools in where the most instances are happening. So 30% of all reported cases are coming out of religious organizations. 39% are coming out of schools. And a lot of us probably have some form of school in our buildings, in our religious organization buildings, in our churches. And so we're at a really high propensity for this to happen. I don't think we should ever approach this as it would never happen here, and so I'm just going through the motions in setting up proactive approaches to ensuring that we have a very high propensity of it having a chance to happen. So understanding that, underreporting and delayed reporting are two killers in there. only 38% of all sexual abuse cases are reported to law enforcement, which should give us real pause and trouble when we're thinking about how that goes. And delayed disclosures, I've seen 20 years go by when cases are coming, and by that time, it's incredibly difficult to investigate. A lot of times, the person's passed on. And you have to know that the person who's reporting is probably one of a line of victims that we will never know about. In the federal system, when we put those who have been prosecuted and their cases adjudicated, we put them in a special prison for child abusers and then interview them, get them counseling so we can understand more of the problem. And I believe the average, at least when I left the FBI, was that for every one that they're convicted of, there's 15 more that were victims that they later tell us about when they're in prison. This was apparent in the Catholic Church scandal. There was 4,392 clergy priests that were discovered in that, though only 252 were ever prosecuted. And that's a direct response to this delayed reporting and underreporting. So our job as XPs, first and foremost, is establishing a clear child protection policy in our churches. To do that, it has to incorporate a few things. One is you have to know your mandatory reporting laws. This is something that I saw up close in cases that we did in the FBI, where the people didn't report because not because of just over empathy, but because they didn't understand what mandatory reporting was and who was responsible. And two states in particular, Texas and Pennsylvania, there is no ministerial privilege in those states, and so there's very little defense to we didn't think we had to report. And so these written policies have to be clearly define what abuse is, clearly define what the reporting procedures are, and clearly enforce from a zero tolerance policy. You saw this in the USA Gymnastics case with Larry Nassar, which is another FBI case that happened while I was in, is that there was written policies, it was trained, but they weren't followed. There was over 250 athletes involved in that case of abuse. And for 2 decades, the reports of abuse were ignored and not passed up. We as XPs cannot allow that to happen in our own organizations. And there's some baseline things that have to be done inside those policies. And at the very base of that pyramid is background checks. It's just the first step of due diligence. But as you go through that paradigm of baseline in background checks, fingerprinting, FBI fingerprinting database is another great thing, and sex offender registries. And they'll catch, those kinds of practices will catch the majority of known offenders. Except I can tell you from doing this for such a long time, this is master manipulators, absolute people that not only groom their victims, but are grooming people around them so that they won't be found out. And we saw that in Boy Scouts of America case, where there was over 7,800 alleged abusers, and reports were coming in, but the reports weren't turned over. Now, this is a long period of time, 1944 to 2016. But the amount of the settlement in that case, $2.46 billion. So from a risk management standpoint, gives us a whole other perspective. Another little detail on that, a lot of times, again, if you're approaching this from, it'll never happen here, and therefore I'll go through the motions, and that's enough due diligence. You have to be, and I would say annually, doing those background checks. That's what we do here. We do the background checks every year on any staff that has anything to do with kids ministry and student ministry. The next step in that I think is most effective. Writing it is one thing, but training it is another. And training and awareness, I think, go hand in hand, not just telling you what the policies are, but actually training in what grooming practices look like. So if it's yearly and it's in front of you, not just the background checks, but actually training this and having people understand grooming. There's a book that's written by Gavin DeBecker. It's called The Gift of Fear. And I think this is a good read for anyone that has an interest in this. And it really does show this gift that we're given to be able to spot something. And it's not the problem that we don't spot it. It's the problem that we don't trust it, or we don't have the courage to follow through with it. And things like kids receiving special favors or gifts from adults, just that's something that has to be in the policy. It has to be something that's trained so people see it. Training and seeing where adults are trying to isolate a child from other peers, or just a gradual introduction of inappropriate touch or private conversation. All of those things, if a person knows that's a grooming method, that's the first step. Having them have the courage to report it is another. And that's the culture that you're as an XP. That's the organizational culture that you want to begin to create in your churches. Jared Fogle, the subway guy, I don't know if you guys remember that case, but he groomed minors for over a decade in his organization. And a lot of associates ignored the red flags because, just like I was when I saw that mom come into a picture on that video, I thought it can't be. It can't be Gerald Fogle. It can't be that mom. It can't be Joe, who's been in our student ministry forever. But it can be, and that's what we have to remove, is those built-in things that keep us from saying it can't be when we know that it could be. Now, I would encourage you to do this if you're not doing it already. Is there's lots of subject matter experts, not just our organization, but law enforcement in general, Homeland Security, FBI. If it's a large enough police department, you probably have these subject matter experts on hand. Well, they'll come to the church, or they'll come to a conference that you're having, and they will train you on this. They have a vested interest, and the best part about that is the training's for free. But once we get through that, and you have the policy and you're doing the training, it really does take attention to detail in its supervision and monitoring strategies. So what I mean by that is, we all know about the 2 adult rule, but yet I'll go and see places where we have 2 adults, but it's a husband-wife team that takes that grade. And that's just not a good practice either, because, and I hate to even bring this story up because I'm a huge college football fan, and I'm particularly a huge Penn State fan, but the Jerry Sandusky case in Pennsylvania, that was a matter of, people brought things forward. They were ignored for a period of time. They finally couldn't be ignored anymore. He stepped out of that position. And even after he stepped out of that position, they still allowed him to be in the facilities. So not only the 2 adult rule, enforcing those things, but having secure facility access. I've been the XP here for about 5-year period of time in the Journey Church outside of Nashville. And during that time, we were in a small facility that hardly had any room. We moved to a larger facility. And the first thing I noticed when we moved into this larger facility is, in order to get from the auditorium to the gym where we were doing education in 2 different buildings attached to the auditorium, you had to go through a hallway that took you by every kid's room on the way to the gym. So from one side of the campus to the other, you had to walk by every kids' room. We went through a $2.5 million renovation project where we physically tore down those connectors that required a person to walk inside in front of all of the kids' rooms because we value security that much. We value access controls that much, and made outdoor canopies. So now the only people that can be down the kids' halls is a parent picking up, the security team, or the teachers. Those are physical things we should look at so that we don't discount the importance of secure facility access. And then this is really where rubber kind of hits the road with the culture that you're trying to build. It's an imperative, is that you have to engender trust, not just with your staff, but with everyone who's a volunteer in those ministries, that they know that what they say is it can be trusted. What they say is coming from a position of authority, and that takes moving, what we call here, moving people from a lower room to an upper room of thinking, that they're not just workers, but they're part of leadership, that they're trusted, and that we want them to talk about things that they see, and there's not going to be any kind of retaliation if what they say isn't something that we want to hear. That everyone can be trusted, and everyone's observations matter. And there's a big difference in having people understand, and I would call this 3 different things. One is what would be violations of policy. So violations of policy have to be addressed, but they're addressed differently than the next step, and that is an allegation of abuse. And the allegation of abuse has to be treated differently than the observation of abuse. It all takes a certain type of response on our part as XPs and as a leadership team. But to have people understand that there are 3 different levels of what they're observing, but all of them are important to hear, because I've never seen a case, no matter what crime you're talking about, that led to a person stealing $1 million on his first theft. It always starts with something small. And so if you have a culture by which you're encouraging people talking about violations of policy, it will help to keep you from having an allegation of abuse later, because you're catching something early. Unfortunately, what we have, and it's not just in churches, but it's especially in churches, it's an all organization, but especially in churches, is we, one, don't want to think poorly of the person that we're working with. And 2, even if we do, even if we're suspicious, we hate to be the person that kind of rats it out. But that's why I'm talking about culture so much, is that a culture of trust, and a culture where the organization, and not just the organization, but God himself is put in its proper place, then we can have the courage to do what's right when we're either seeing violations of policy, allegations of abuse, or actual observations of abuse, that we can address it with courage and responsibility, rather than just acting as if, oh, we need to cover this up, we need to push it on or push it away. It is something that we're addressing head on. So just to recap, bring a little conclusion to what I had to say today, and then I'm looking forward to your questions about things, is 1, mandatory reporting and compliance is just a non-negotiable. You have to know those, and you have to be able to train them, and you have to be able to act on them. 2, the proper screening and background checks are important, but you just have to see that as baseline due diligence and not the finish line, meaning they have to be done regularly. Any kind of question marks that come up in those have to be addressed immediately. And I think it's not just good enough to have the background checks and say we did the baseline. If you have someone new, particularly someone that's new to the church, getting some type of feedback from places that they've served before, I think is great. Talking to their family, getting to know the family before they're in a place where kids are vulnerable is an important step in that. So I have some things, and of course ECAP does of where it has to be not just, hey, we're so desperate for volunteers that we'll be in and we'll kind of look the other way and be happy that we filled the spot. It should be a position that you feel like we're getting people who we can really trust and share the same love for these kids that they deserve. Last two things, training staff to recognize abuse, I think, is crucial. If they're not trained, they're more likely to just look past it, even if their sixth sense is telling them that it's wrong. And then I think collaboration with law enforcement really strengthens accountability. You have a person that you can go to and run hypotheticals by, or run something by to see if you think it's just a violation of a policy or this is something that really means something deeper. I'll be hitting on this the whole time that we're together, but creating that culture with intentionality and proactiveness is really crucial to risk management, and most importantly, to understanding the problems that we face. So thanks for your time. I'm looking forward to the rest of this, and I will hand it over to Weyland.
Thanks, Matt. Matt, real quick, remind us the book that you mentioned just for everybody. Yeah, you're muted there.
Sorry. Gavin de Becker, The Gift of Fear.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for just opening us up so well. Weyland, take it from here, sir.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, real quick, will you just kind of share with everybody like what that looks like for a church to engage local law enforcement early? As you mentioned, it's always good to have a working relationship with your local law enforcement.
Yeah, and law enforcement varies so much from place to place, depending on how large the city that you're in. Large police departments will probably have a person that is responsible for abuse of children. Crimes against children is kind of the lexicon that we use in law enforcement. And they might do everything from human trafficking to online stuff to whatever. But if you get to know that person's supervisor, that relationship is really good, because that's a local contact that you can have that's a subject matter expert and has the same mindset, hopefully, that you do of proactiveness. Come down, train my people. They'll be happy to do that. I've never run into anybody that isn't willing to come over and spend a little time working with churches, working with schools to pass along information about signs of abuse. You can do it from the federal side too. If you have a federal office, FBI or Homeland Security, there's also professionals there who that's what they do as well. And the training's free, building that relationship. I think a lot of times, again, depending on the person, might be intimidated about calling, but the people in those departments will be happy to talk to you, and they'll appreciate that relationship.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, we invited someone from Frisco PD in, and they reviewed some of our policies and procedures, and they met with our staff and just kind of talked through from their side of things, best practices. And so it was great. And like you said, most of the time law enforcement is going to be very open to proactively helping create a safer environment for sure. So that's great. That's good thoughts. So one of the things, Matt, obviously has a law enforcement background and spoke a lot about the realities that are all around us that oftentimes we don't really want to accept or believe are happening, especially if in our context we do not have firsthand experience of those things happening. But they do, and they are happening, and it's prudent of us to take as many precautionary measures as possible to create the safest environment possible for our people. That's part of shepherding the flock. And so one of the things that Matt talked about was creating a culture of trust. Well, I'm going to piggyback a lot from an implementation side of things with creating a culture of safety. And I think this is very much of a stewardship, discipleship opportunity for church leadership with their people holistically, all of them, not just those that work directly with children, but to understand that, man, as a family, we want to look out for one another and care for one another. And so Jeremy Herron at our church goes by Redbeard. That's what we call him around here because he always has a lot of red hair on his face and head. And I worked with Jeremy for about 10 years here at Providence Church. I've been the executive pastor since 2017. And Jeremy was our children's director all of those years. And so I've had the privilege of working alongside Jeremy as he went through the process with Jeff and others, really shaping and forming what ECAP standards are today. And so Providence Church was a charter member of ECAP and gone through the accreditation process, and so we believe in it. And we were not a church that would have defined or described ourselves as soft on policies and procedures around safety. But we are also not a church that kind of had our head in the sand, thinking like, well, we've got it all together. There's nothing else that we need to do. And so I think when you think about child safety, if you think about an organization like ECAP coming in and helping you institute the highest levels of child abuse prevention and safety measures, some of you may think, man, that sounds too daunting, or we don't have the manpower to pull that off. Some of you may be thinking, man, we've already turned over all the rocks. We already do all the things. And so really what I would say from an implementation standpoint, the first thing you need to do is really ask the question, well, what is our church's motivation for safety measures? And have an honest conversation internally about what is our motivation. And the motivation could come in multiple forms, but one of them is going to be, man, you wouldn't say this out loud, but your actions define your motivation as we're just going to do the bare minimum. We just want to do the bare minimum, make sure that, we're able to say, oh yeah, we do this or that. But ultimately your motivation is the bare minimum. Some of you, some churches are thinking, man, we just want to do enough to make parents feel comfortable, to make parents feel like, okay, yes, my child is safe there. Others of you are thinking, man, we want the highest level of protection possible. And so I think it's important as a church organization that you stop and you first ask that honest question of what is our motivation for safety, and have an honest conversation. And then I think what's really important, and this is really hard for some of us, is then to investigate your safety standards of perceived versus reality. So a lot of us would define a culture, whether it's of our home or describe ourselves. But then when you start peeling back the layers, what you really see in that person, in that organization, doesn't quite match up with what they say they are. And I think this is an important first step for you as a church to go, hey, this is what we would describe our safety standards to be. But then when we lay them against reality, they don't quite align. And so there's a gap there. And so it's kind of at this point where the church needs to really put a stake in the ground and say, hey, are we committed to being a culture of safety, Or are we just going to be a church that has a safety initiative? And those are two very different things. A culture of safety is really this holistic belief like, hey, as the body of Christ, we are all on guard for one another and the care of one another, versus a safety initiative is just going to say, hey, as an XP, I'm going to go to my children's director and say, hey, you guys need to implement ECAP standards. Good luck, farewell. Let me know when you're done. And those are two different approaches. Okay. And so I think that's where you need to begin as a church, is really unpacking some of those questions about what is our motivation and what is the perceived reality versus the reality. And then after that, you need to start asking the question, okay, well, where do we start? We want the highest level of ECAP standards. We want to maintain these things. We want a culture of safety. So where do we start? And I would say you start at the top. Culture change requires a top-down approach. And so if you're the executive pastor, if you're part of the executive team, if your executive team is you and a lead pastor and some elders or deacons, whatever it is, you collectively need to come together and say, hey, are we committed as a church organization to prioritize pushing these initiatives throughout the entirety of the church and inviting everybody into the process? Okay. And so the reason why I say that culture is top down is because you, as the leaders of the church, are going to have to cast the vision, and the vision has to be driven by a why. Why is safety such a significant thing to us as an organization, as a church? And the why is so critical because safety is something that everybody believes in up to a certain point. Okay. It's one of those things that's really easy for us to talk about and engage in. Yeah, I believe in that. I believe in that. But then when push comes to shove and there's work to do, or there's a cost that comes with it, then you start to realize, well, maybe we don't believe in it as much as we thought. And that's where leadership has to be able to cast a vision of why it matters and why it should matter to you. Even when you say, hey, I don't serve around kids, but collectively as the body of Christ, we want to be bought in. And so it starts at the top. Okay. And then from there, I would say from an implementation standpoint, it requires a team. This is, again, if it's a culture of safety, it can't be the initiative of one person. It can't just be one children's director and they're responsible for getting everybody to buy in, but instead it's got to be a team approach, and that understands that the team is working together and has the full support of church leadership. Okay. And then I think it requires that team to have an honest assessment of what are we currently doing, what is lacking, what needs to change. And once you have that honest assessment, then you really know where you're at and where you're trying to go. And the ECAP standards and practices, they're going to help you walk through having that honest assessment of yourself and then giving you a playbook of how to move forward. Okay. And so, when we started implementing these things, obviously we had a lot of insider information as Jeremy was continually communicating with the elders of the church, the ongoing growth and formation of ECAP and their standards. Jeremy already had a background in education that came with a lot of standards in place, and so our church, I would say, was in a very, very healthy place to begin with. But as we went through the process, we realized that there was still more room for growth in our policies and procedures. And then even beyond that, in understanding that, oh yeah, hey, we're not just going to do this for our children's ministry, but we want it to be a culture of safety. So therefore, we've got to expand our education of this topic to the entirety of the church and invite them in to the process to be a part of it. And so some of you churches are at a place of saying, yeah, we want that, but man, there's just some obstacles that seem to be standing in our way. And so some of those obstacles may be that, you're saying, well, we already have something in place. And that's a great thing. I'm glad that you have something in place. But I would say, hey, just as if you're going to go buy a car from somebody, and it's a used car, and they tell you all the specs about the car. They tell you how they handled the car, that they got the oil changed regularly, that they rotated tires, that they did all these things. You are still going to take that car to a mechanic to get an inspection done. And so even if you're a church that thinks, man, we've really got good safety things in place, it's still worth partnering with an ECAP to go, hey, we want a third party to tell us how we're doing, where the gaps are, where we need to improve in order to continue to improve our overall safety here at the church. As some of you may be thinking, man, it's just going to cost too much money. Background checks cost money, ministry training, third-party ministry trainings cost money. These things are just too much for us. And you may find out that, yeah, an initial rollout may have some costs, some financial costs baked into it. But as you get into the process and more of your people are a part of the process, those initial maybe expenses are going to decrease dramatically. Okay. And so again, we never want costs to be a deterrent of doing really important things. And so if you think cost is a deterrent for you, I would still invite you in to have a conversation with ECAP and see if it is the reality that you think it is. Another thing that is we hear often is the tyranny of the urgent. And that, man, going into and enhancing our policies and procedures, our onboarding process is just going to slow things down. And right now, as a children's director, all I can think about is, can I get enough warm bodies back in our children's in order to take care of all the kids? This is a reality for a lot of churches. And so if that's you, you're not alone in that. But I would say that it doesn't need to slow down the onboarding, recruiting, and training of children leaders, whether that's in your children's ministry or in your student ministry or in your childcare or any other areas of the church. It just doesn't have to. The practices and the policies and procedures, once you get them in place, the interviewing process, all the things of onboarding doesn't take as much time as you think it would. And so again, I would say, hey, if your obstacle is tyranny of the urgent, man, have a conversation with ECAP. We can help you overcome that obstacle. And then another, is we've never had a problem in the past and we don't anticipate having a problem in the future. But again, prevention is the best method for keeping your people safe, not hoping that something bad won't happen. And so you want to take a proactive approach in this. This is the reason why we buy health insurance or auto insurance. It's not because we want something bad to happen to us, but the reality is that something may happen and we want to do everything we can to prevent it. But we want to make sure that we invest in the health and safety of our organization. And so enhancing your policies and procedures and onboarding and safety measures are so instrumental in reducing the risk of something tragic happening to someone in your church and in the life of your church. And so we get it. Matt and I, we have to prioritize a lot of things as executive pastors. You have to prioritize a lot of things as church leadership. But this is one that I would strongly recommend comes from you and your church leadership and is top down and is creating an environment of tremendous support and care for those that you're tasking with doing the heavy lifting. Okay. And so at the end of the day, what you want, or what I would encourage you to want, is to build a culture of safety. And I would say your primary responsibility as a leader is to continually share the why behind what we're doing. So you want to create clarity, you want to reinforce clarity, and you want to over communicate clarity. Because people will constantly be in and out of your church. There's new people coming in all the time. There is no perfect listener. And so you may think, man, I've communicated this so clearly so many times, yet people are hearing only fragments of what you're saying. And so you are a gong that's continually reinforcing why we care about the safety of everybody in the life of the church and why we're inviting everybody in to be a part of that process. And so if you can champion that team that you've assembled to implement the safety standards of ECAP will be eternally grateful to you and your support of them by inviting the whole church in to the process. And so, as I mentioned before, another thing that you're going to want to do is create a team. And the team approach is really critical because no one single person can or should handle this. So, like at our church, our team, it has a students representative, a children's representative, a child care or a Mother's Day Out program representative, and a child care representative, and a community group representative, because we run community groups here at Providence Church that meet outside of the church, but some of them will have child care during the time that they meet as adults. And so we want even that practice to meet ECAP safety standards. And so that team does have a lead. And for us, that lead is our children's representative on there, but all of them are responsible for knowing and implementing this process throughout their specific area of ministry. And what you'll find really quickly as you start to get this ball rolling is you have a lot of people who serve in multiple areas of the church. And because you have this culture of safety where we are treating really all of our volunteers the same, then as they move from one department to another, or they serve in multiple places, they have already gone through the same training that would be required of them as if they were a first timer starting to serve. And so even that standardization of the onboarding, of the application, of the training that they have to do, of the background check, of the interview process, all those things here at Providence are standardized amongst all of our people, so that everyone's speaking the same language and everyone's getting the same training. And then as people move from one area of serving to another, it's really simple to bring them into a different area of serving in the church. And so those are some things that I would encourage you to think about and to do, and some ways that you as an executive pastor continue to really support the efforts of your teams. The other thing too is I would require of myself, of our lead pastor, of our elders, and I would encourage of you that your leadership team goes through all those same processes as well. So practice what you preach. And so I go through my background check and my ministry training. I go through all of those kind of things to when I serve, in order to serve in our kids ministry. I have a lot of teenagers, so I do not serve in our student ministry. I need a break from that, but I do love my kids and I do love teenagers. But wherever you're serving in the church, even if you're not volunteering, I would strongly encourage that your leadership team is going through all the same things that you're asking everybody else to go through. It just sets the standard, and it will help reinforce that, hey, we're all in this together. Okay. Something else that our children's team does is they host a semi-annual training for everyone that serves in our kids ministry. And typically during one of those two, they'll do some ministry training. And it's just a way to collectively, when they already have all these people together, that they can kind of knock some of this stuff out at one time. And what we'll always do is we'll invite anybody in the church who wants to come and be a part of those trainings to come. And so it's an open invitation. And so again, it's another way for us to collectively communicate in front of the whole body that safety is important and that you're a part of this being a safe environment. And so come and participate and go through that, even if you don't directly serve with kids. And so we want everyone to be bought into that. And so as we rolled this out here at Providence Church, it's just become baked into our culture. We expect this of all of our people that serve at church here. We've extended it beyond those who serve with kids, in order that, like, again, everybody who is going to serve at Providence Church, we want them to understand the significance of safety for our kids, and Two, it makes it a lot easier for them to serve in multiple areas if we just treat everybody the same and put them all through the same process. And so let me conclude with your role. If you're a church leader, your role is to support, support, support. Okay. Give credit to others, bring great attention to your team lead, to your team members who are trying to implement this, publicly highlight how much you appreciate what they're doing, publicly praise the effort that they give towards this, support, support, support. Okay. And then I would say continually reinforce the vision on their behalf. Don't just expect them to convince everybody to be a part of this, but you continually champion why this is important to us. And then I would say write checks. There is some financial costs. There's going to be time commitment to this. There's human capital costs. So I would say, man, be willing as leadership of the church to write whatever checks need to be written in order to get your church in a place that is committed as a culture to safety. And then remember this, and this is one of the hardest things I think for especially our kids ministry is they are never done recruiting. They can't ever take their foot off the gas and think we've got all the leaders we'll ever need. We'll never need another leader. But unfortunately, the reality is, especially in an environment where we rely so heavily on volunteers, is we never get done onboarding, recruiting. And so safety is the same thing. You never arrive where you think, great, we don't have to think about this anymore. We've got everything good and we can put it on cruise control. Unfortunately, we can never put it on cruise control. And so it's good for you to remember that and continue to encourage and reinforce the work as it continues to go on and on and on. And so your role is, I think, vital and critical for the church. This is not a children's director role. This is an executive team leader role from the top down. And so we've had great success embedding this into our culture. And I think it's primarily because we had the buy-in of our leadership structure from day one.
That's great, Weyland. Thank you so much. And just as a quick note, if you do have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. We'll make sure they get asked. Question for both you and Matt. You mentioned that you had buy-in from the beginning, but I imagine that's not always the case for all churches. So what does it look like then to shepherd, so to speak, the under shepherds or the board of deacons really towards having a right mindset about this?
Weyland, go ahead.
Yeah. So like I said, maybe we were very fortunate in the fact that we were present at the ground level. But we had even before ECAP came on the radar, we would have said we've got good, we care about safety and we've got good policies and procedures in place. But ultimately, it did require us to step up our commitment. And so the elders, we're an elder-led church, and so we have some of those elders on staff and some that aren't on staff. But it did require all of us to have a good understanding. So Jeremy at the time was our children's director. And so he would come into our elder meetings and tell us, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're wanting to do. Allow us to ask questions of him. Some of those questions are going to be around time commitment. Some of those questions are going to be around financial. Your leadership team is going to think different ways. And so give them space to process that. And then ultimately, Jeremy's asking of us, hey, this is what we need, or this is what we perceive we're going to need from the elders of the church in order to really get this into place, and give the elders the opportunity to give their buy-in. And then if they don't give their buy-in, be patient and continue to push and push. And if they do give their buy-in, thank them for it and hit the ground running.
Yeah, I'd echo that. As we've been working through this, I think the benefit you have here is you're selling something that makes sense. Like, who who's going to argue against wanting to protect kids, right? I think you're trying to sell something that makes sense. How to do it and to what extent is really what you have to explain. And so we're also an elder-led church, and uh, we've brought the idea of not just doing the bare minimum, but doing everything we can. Like the risk management part of this is easy to explain. That if the worst would happen tomorrow, can you look back and said we did everything that we could? Doesn't mean that something won't happen, but did we do everything that we could to prevent this? And then you have to be honest about what is everything that you can. And then be ready. The next step is be ready to put the resources at it. And that's both time and money. But I had mentioned this as I was talking that our leadership model here, our culture model, one of the big things that we stress all the time is getting people empowered. A lot of times church organizations, everybody has the responsibility, but nobody has the authority. And we call it bringing peace. It's not my language for it, but we use this language. It's out of a Mancini book actually, and we say bringing people from the lower room to the upper room. So we don't want to have the culture where people just come to church, get entertained, and leave. We want them to be holding something and being in part of something and even in charge of something. And so I think people, if you're willing to share that kind of authority, then there's plenty of people that want to jump on board and work to do this the right way and not just do the bare minimum.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Weyland, did you have something you wanted to add there?
No.
Okay, all right. I saw
That's
you
great.
unmute. I didn't know if you had something there.
Oh,
So one of the sayings that we often use in organizations is the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And certainly ministry teams are busy and often don't have excess capacity beyond just even, depending on their role, getting everything ready for Sunday. But what would you gentlemen say is the best way to organize the build out of a child safety program, especially in light of varying sizes of churches with busy teams?
yeah. So I mean, ECAP's a great resource for that. Also, just to recognize, like, hey, no matter where you're at, there's another church that we can connect you with, or you can connect with, that's one step ahead of you. And so that's shared resources. You don't have to think all this stuff up in a vacuum. That can feel very daunting. And so just that recognition of like, hey, we don't, we can start where we're at and we can take one step to the right. And then we can take another step. And so it's not really as daunting, maybe as it may be in your head. There's tons of resources that we have, and churches are notorious for being good sharers of resources. And so that's a simple way to overcome that.
Yeah, I'll echo that, Wayland. I think one of the hardest things in ministry, particularly you think that 85% of churches in the country are like 100 people or less. And it doesn't mean that you're not facing the same problems. You're just facing them in a different scale. And one of the best ways to overcome some of these problems is, like I was saying before, is like sharing the responsibility. Somebody has to own this. And I think we all feel overwhelmed at times. And just knowing that there's organizations out there, subject matter experts that would love to come alongside you and help you to to craft your policies, to improve your standards, to give you tips is comforting. When you're walking this with someone else, it makes it a lot less daunting. And again, I said this and I'll say it all the time. This is not a hard sell. You'll find people that are passionate about protecting kids, and then empower them. Let them run with it. Make them responsible. Somebody has to own it. Let somebody who's passionate about it own it, and then just guide and supervise that along the way. It doesn't have to be, the same person that's doing everything else doing this too.
It's really good. One of you mentioned someone's got to own it, someone's got to lead it, and so one of the roles we we hear about within the accreditation process is the child safety coordinator. So really, if one of you would just share with us a little bit more about what the role is of the child safety coordinator, what's the right kind of person in your experience that you've seen be successful in that role, and does that necessarily have to be someone that is a paid staff member, or can that be someone else?
Yeah, so for us it is, she's in our children's ministry, and she is primarily responsible for all people. We have our children's team broken up by people and curriculum. Some churches will do by ages, but we have landed on people and curriculum, and so she interfaces with the most people at the church, and so she's also in that role because she's highly detail oriented and administrative, and those skill sets fit really well the profile of the person in charge of implementation of something like this. And so she is our child safety coordinator, but like I said, we created a sub team around her and under her from varying other ministries, so that she's not the sole person that's trying to implement these things across all of our ministries. And so for us, it is staff who have taken these on, but I don't think it needs to be.
Yeah, I think we've seen that in different models in different churches of who actually is the owner. Weyland said something good. Somebody that's really organized, detail oriented, I think is important because there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of administrative details to keep track of. But we've seen it where it can be a staff person that owns it and successful. We've seen it where it's a lay person that's passionate about it and owns it, and both can be equally as successful. So I think that shouldn't be something that just has to be owned on staff. It just has to be supervised well from staff to make sure that what needs to happen is happening.
Good, good. So you both spoke about having a culture of safety, a culture of just being aware and trained and ready for these things. Certainly depending on the size of your church, you may have a lot of kids and a lot of parents. What have you found to be the best way to communicate and then communicate and enforce these safety measures with parents? So, the classic example is parent comes to pick up their child at one of the children's ministry rooms, doesn't have the tag or whatever's required. And so they say, well, it's me. But how do we really communicate the gravity and the reason? I think one of the words that Matt used, one of the phrases was a zero tolerance policy. How do we communicate that well to parents in a shepherding way, but also in a way that gives it the gravitas, the due regard?
Yeah, I think it has to be incorporated into all things that you're communicating. It can't be the afterthought. It has to be somewhat primary, along with the loving approach of we're doing this for the benefit and the safety of your child. We take these things seriously. And in any organization and anything you're trying to do, if you're not paying attention to the little things, you're probably not doing the big things good either. And I think that's a larger culture thing is we care about even the little things, and little things matter.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jeff posted a question in my long ramblings that is really interesting because we came face to face with this, where he said, when do we cross a line and turn well-meaning safety measures into safetyism, where safety trumps everything else? And this topic, maybe the most hot topic on this from a philosophy of ministry is church debt. where people have very strong opinions, and people are going to have very strong opinions about safety, and some are just going to take it as a more lax approach, and some of them are going to take it as a very extreme approach. And so how do we navigate both parties? And so we had an event, our students had an event, and they needed about 25 people to run outdoor game stations. And that's all they were going to do. They were going to show up. They're going to be outdoors for 2 hours. They were going to run a station, and we required ECAP standards to be met by all those people. And boy, that was a challenge, because there's a lot of logic that goes, they're not going to be alone with kids. They're going to be outside. Everyone's going to be around. They're not leaders. They're just standing there telling the groups with their leaders how to perform the task. But this kind of goes back to this event actually was the catalyst for us to say, hey, everybody that serves in the church, we're just going to put through the safety onboarding standards, so that for events like this, we've just widened our net of people that are already in the system and able to participate and understand the role of safety and their role of upholding those standards. And so, again, to what Matt said, you're continually baking it into the culture and the language of the church, where it's not seen so much as an obstacle, it's just an expectation.
Yeah, I think that culture thing, and I'll just talk about this from a larger sense. I think one of the dangers we've had in the North American church, and that might be too small of a scope, but just that we've expected too little from people overall, right? Like, we went through this period of time where we expect people just to show up, get entertained, hopefully they throw a check in the box, and we've lowered this expectation of excellence through the things that we do. And when I say that, I mean from how our people understand biblical literacy to how we conduct groups and show real Christian love to one another, and uh, how we don't teach kids, we just tell them stories, and how, like, all of that we should be continually striving to do with excellence and not just go through the motions. And so once you're improve, like, I don't care if you started your policies on this or you start with your policies on something else, when you start that and raise the bar for people and tell them what their expectations, what our expectations of them to be part of the covenant people, I think they rise to the occasion. I think that it just helps across the board, and why not start with this program?
Yeah, it's really good, really good. So just a couple pragmatic questions. So certainly one question that is out there is, as we encounter some sort of allegation of abuse, what is the right way, or what is the right way to handle those concerns or allegations in a way that protects children and maintains trust? So, we've done the work to prepare, and an allegation is brought up. Talk us through just a little bit of that.
Matt, you want to start us?
Yeah, I think this kind of comes down to what we were talking about there with there's all kinds of things that come to our attention, right? So, and I was trying to parse out those different levels. One is like a violation of policy. And I know, Kevin, you mentioned an allegation of abuse, but if for an allegation, if for a violation of policy, I think it starts there. That's when people see that you're serious about enforcing the policy that's in place. It helps not to completely avoid and the situation, but it does help to reinforce that you're serious and that you're courageous enough to take action, and that you'll be transparent and it's not going to be swept under the rug. Like, we take this seriously. Yeah, Jeff just posted here a broken windows philosophy. That's exactly right. I mean, that's how when I got to New York as an FBI agent in 1995, the place was a mess. And Rudy Giuliani took over and implemented this idea of broken windows policy where even the smallest things get enforced because the person that's willing to break the little thing is going to break the big thing. And you probably get way in front of your problem before it happens. But let's just say there is an allegation of abuse. Again, your first thought is not, oh darn, this is going to look really bad on the church. It's how do we address this from an integrity standpoint to do what's right by the victim, the person, even the person that's alleged. How do we honor Christ in the way that we handle this situation? And that means that there is transparency. It's better to get in front of it with your people, to let them know right off the bat that this is from your team, this is the way we're going to handle this. You bring in the level of oversight that's needed for the particular allegation. And we're talking about broad ranges of things, right? So, but you're transparent. You go by your policy. You get subject matter experts involved, whether that be law enforcement or whatnot, and you have a sense of urgency about the way that you address it.
Yeah, so from a practical standpoint, we've just been very protected from any really anything active. For us, the most typical scenario is at a student in a community in a group of peers opens up about something that happened to them at some point in their past. Maybe it's recent. It doesn't, it's a third party, family member, whatever, and so that will come to us. And so we always have, and I've done this with us, our women's student director. I got on the phone with her, but since she was the recipient of the information directly, I was not. We got on the phone and reported it. I was just there. I offered to be there as a support to her. It felt a little overwhelming, and so it went great. We also make sure that things like, I was doing a member meeting with a couple, and they shared something with me that had to do with this young couple, the male having illegal activity with a minor in his not too distant past. And so I just told them, I was like, hey, thank you for sharing that. I will need to report that since a minor was involved. And so I'm fine with telling people from the honesty standpoint that Matt was talking about, hey, the information that was just shared with me, I have to do my due diligence with it. And I'm just letting you know, kind of, we don't have to tell them that we're going to tell. But as a part of like, hey, overall, just we want to be as upfront and transparent as possible, but also not bend on policies and procedures, whether it's state regulated, federal regulated, or just in-house.
Yeah. I just can't say this enough. It's easier organizationally to recover from an incident if you handle it correctly in the beginning. It's worse when you try to cover something up for fear of it being a scandal. There's a larger scandal if you're not transparent. And those things come in due time. I mean, there's prudent investigation that has to happen, but the worst thing to do is sit on it or not follow your policies that are in place.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then it's not great stewardship or care then of those involved if we don't handle it the right way from the beginning.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Well, we are just in our final few minutes here. Gentlemen, anything that you would want to add just to leave our audience with as they are contemplating these things and thinking about what they're doing next?
I mean, I'll just remind you that hey, no matter where you're at, there's room for improvement, and to be committed as an organization to doing things with as much excellence as possible. I would hope permeates every area of ministry, including that of this specific topic when it comes to creating the safest environment as possible. I would also encourage you that, hey, it's just one step to the right. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't allow any of those just kind of preconceived notions deter you from having a conversation and at least taking that step. I make myself available to anyone that would like to ask high level or very detail oriented questions. You feel free and ping me. I'm sure we can put contact information up for you guys, but I'm available to you, and I appreciate you just taking time to investigate this.
Yeah, and I'd just like to drive home the point that you think about the privilege that we have to shepherd and steward Christ's bride. And there's nothing more important in that than protecting those who are the most vulnerable. And we take that responsibility seriously. And that should create in us this sense of urgency about doing everything that we can to ensure that when something would happen that we can't say, boy, I wish I would have. There's that should play on our decision making and our intentionality of how we approach this problem set. Um, the blessing and the curse of seeing the things that I've seen over a 24-year career with the FBI is that I know it happens. And when I know it happens, there's no excuse I would have, and it would just break me to know that we didn't do everything that was prudent and available uh, to try to avoid it, and helping others to see that same sense of urgency and being intentional as well, I think is important. So let's step up and be leaders, and not take this as a backseat issue.
Yeah, really good, really good. Well, Matt, Weyland, thank you so much for just taking the time to share your experience, expertise, and just some real good practical information. Certainly, we can find out more at ecap.net. Lots of great resources on that site to get answers to your questions as well as get other contact information. So thank you again, Matt and Weyland. Really appreciate you taking the time to share with us all this information today.
You bet. Thanks, Kevin.